You stand in front of the large, merciless door of Arkham Asylum and feel the cold metal crawl through your fingers as you push it open. It is a Monday, a completely ordinary day, and yet nothing about you or your life ever truly feels ordinary. Not since you got here. Not since you became part of Dr. Jonathan Crane's research group. The neon lights of the long corridor flicker like the nerves of an exhausted mind. The air here smells of disinfectant, old concrete, and something else you could never quite name. There is a certain tension in this place, an electric hum that crawls down your spine with every step. Your shoes click softly on the tiles, a soothing rhythm as you walk through the corridors. You know where you need to go. You always do that. Routine is your salvation, your anchor in a world that increasingly feels like quicksand. Dr. Crane is already waiting when you enter the lab. He leans against the large desk in the center of the room with the calmness of a man who is aware of his power. His pale eyes scrutinize you as if you were not his colleague, but a subject of his experiments.
Right on time as always, Dr. Quinzel.
He says, a hint of mockery in his voice that hits you every time, even though you tell yourself you're immune to it by now.
Good morning, Dr. Crane.
You reply, your voice smooth as glass. You are good at putting on this mask, better than most. Years of training, right? You have learned to rein in your emotions, to lock them away in a small box deep within you. He hands you a folder, and you take it even though you already know what's inside. These are the results of the latest experiments, the numbers, diagrams, notes, all pointing to one thing: progress. But progress at what cost? You have asked the question 100 times, quietly, just for yourself, when you sit alone in your small apartment at night. You have never said it out loud, afraid of what might happen if you do. Crane is a man of influence, with connections. He could destroy you if he wanted to, and you know it.
The latest mixture shows promising results,
He says, pulling a small bottle from the pocket of his lab coat. The liquid inside shimmers golden, almost beautiful, if one didn't know what it was capable of. You heard the screams coming from the cells on the lower floor. Screams that echo in your ears long after you have left the building. You have seen the faces of the prisoners he calls voluntary subjects. The fear in their eyes, the despair that ignites a kind of furious flicker within you, one that you never allow to linger too long.
It's impressive what the human spirit can produce under pressure.
He murmurs more to himself than to you. You nod mechanically, as you always do, and force yourself not to stare at the little bottle for too long. You know you shouldn't, but you can't stop thinking about how easy it would be to throw the bottle in his direction, break it, and let him drown in his own fear. But you don't do it. Of course not.
I need you this afternoon to analyze the new data,
He says, and the conversation is over before it even began. Crane disappears from the room, and you are left behind, with the folder in one hand and the burning guilt in the other. You sink into the chair at the desk and take a deep breath. Your gaze wanders to the papers in front of you, but your thoughts drift away. How did you end up here, Harleen? How did the passionate student who studied psychiatry to help people become this woman? A woman who remains silent while others suffer, just to secure her own position? You don't know. Or maybe you know it, but don't want to admit it. You stare at the folder in front of you, the numbers and notes blurring before your eyes. It feels as if the air in the room is getting thicker, the walls closer. This building, this place, has a kind of weight that settles on your shoulders, gnaws through your bones. You try to breathe away the despair, but it clings to you like a shadow. The thought of the vial, of Crane's sadistic experiments, makes your fingers drum restlessly on the tabletop. The door creaks. You whirl around, your heartbeat faster than it should be. But it's just Ivy, the lab assistant. She carries a box full of files and throws you a tired smile as she kicks the door open.
Another long day, huh?
She asks as she places the box on the table. You nod slightly.
Always.
Ivy looks like she wants to say something else, but she decides against it. Maybe she senses that you're not in the mood, or maybe she's just as drained as you are. She turns around and disappears as quickly as she came, and you are alone again. almost alone.
Dr. Quinzel.
You hear a quiet, fragile voice behind you. You flinch. The voice comes from the intercom on the wall. Your gaze automatically wanders to the small cameras in the upper corners of the room. They are everywhere in Arkham, watching every movement, every whisper. But the inmates have their own ways of making themselves known.
Dr. Quinzel, please. You have to help me.
You know that voice. It belongs to one of the prisoners in the high-security wing, a man who is called Apollo. He was convicted of serious violent crimes, but something about his record has always made you pause. No pattern, no logic behind his actions, just raw, unbridled despair.
Apollo, you know you are not allowed to speak directly to me.
You say, and your voice is cooler than you want it to sound. It is the voice you have learned to use to maintain distance, to protect yourself.
They don't know what he's doing, what he is doing to us.
His words cut through the silence like a knife, and you can't help but feel a shiver run down your spine. You swallow hard.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Of course you know that.
He hisses, his voice suddenly bitter.
You hear the screams. You see the results, but you do nothing. Why are you doing nothing?
It's as if he had spoken your thoughts out loud. Your heart beats painfully in your chest, and for a moment you don't know what to say.
I can't.
You finally whisper, more to yourself than to him.
You can, but you don't want to.
His tone becomes quieter, more threatening.
Do you know what it does to a person when they can no longer control their fear? If he feels nothing but pain and terror? Crane is destroying us, and you just watch.
The connection drops, and the silence that remains is deafening. You close your eyes and place a hand on your belly, as if you could somehow soothe the guilt that is gathering there. Apollo is right. Of course he's right. But what can you do? You are just a psychiatrist, a woman who has fought hard to earn her place in a system that protects men like Crane. If you stand against him, you will lose everything. Your job, your credibility, your safety. You try to push the thought aside, but it stays, like a splinter that keeps burrowing deeper into your flesh. Later, as you leave the lab, the hallways are almost empty. The few employees you see look just as tired and rushed as you. There is no eye contact, no conversations. Everyone is trapped in their own little world, their own hell. But as you walk, you feel something, a weight in your coat that shouldn't be there. You stop and reach into the pocket. Your fingers brush against a small vial, golden, shimmering, the same one that Crane showed you this morning. Your breath catches. Your head is spinning with questions. How did it get here? Did he place it there intentionally? Or was it someone else? You look around, but the hallway is empty. The cameras hum softly above you, but they give you no answers. You close your hand around the bottle and walk faster, your heartbeat a chaotic rhythm in your chest. Maybe you think, as you step into the cold night, it's time to make a decision. The cold night air hits your face as you leave the gates of Arkham behind you. You pull the coat tighter around your body, but the cold that torments you doesn't come from outside. Your fingers are still tightly closed around the bottle, as if it could remind you that it's real. You have no idea why it was in your bag, but just the thought that Crane might have placed it there sends chills down your spine. Was it a message, a test, or maybe just a macabre game? You walk faster. Your footsteps echo on the sidewalk, and you avoid looking too long into the shadows. It's ridiculous that you feel so paranoid, but Arkham has a way of making you feel like you're being watched, even when no one is there. Arriving home, you close the door behind you and lean heavily against it, as if you need to protect yourself from the world outside. Your gaze falls on the small apartment, the same apartment you've had for years, small, sparsely furnished, but somehow familiar. The little bottle sparkles in your hand as it catches the dim light of your living room lamp. You know you should throw it away, or take it back to the lab tomorrow. But something is holding you back. You sit down on the old sofa and place the bottle on the coffee table. It lies there, innocent, and yet you feel as if it is mocking you. Maybe Crane did it on purpose, do you think? Maybe he wanted to see what you would do. The idea makes you angry. Of course he would do that. Crane loves to manipulate the people around him, to test them like rats in a cage. And you are no exception. A part of you wants to prove to him that you are different, that you are smarter than he thinks. But another part of you knows that he expects exactly that from you. You pull your legs up to yourself, your thoughts a chaotic whirlpool. You can still hear the screams from the lower floors, the voices of the prisoners desperately pleading for help. And you can't forget Apollo's words.
They're just watching.
You press your hands against your temples and try to dispel the echo of those words. But it remains. It always remains. Later in the night, you wake up. You don't know what woke you up, but your heart is racing, and sweat is on your forehead. You turn to the side and see the little bottle still on the coffee table. It glimmers in the moonlight filtering through the thin curtains, and for a moment it almost looks alive. You sit up, your breath heavy. Something about this night feels wrong, as if the world around you is just a shell, and beneath it lurks something dark, just waiting for you to discover it. Without thinking, you reach for the bottle. It feels cool, almost uncomfortable against your skin, and yet you hold it tightly. What if you find out what it really is? What it can really do? The thought frightens you, but it also attracts you. A part of you wants to know. Not for Crane, not for the research, but for you. You get up, go to the small kitchen and look for a syringe. It takes a while until you find one, a relic from your time as a student, when you had to take care of every experiment yourself. Your hands tremble as you draw a tiny amount of the liquid. Not much, just a drop. You tell yourself that it's purely scientific, that you just want to understand what Crane is up to. But deep inside you know that this is not the truth. You hesitate, the needle in your hand. Your heart beats so loudly that it drowns out everything else. You could just put it down, take it back to the lab, ignore everything. But instead, you press your lips together and carefully prick your skin. The pain is barely noticeable, but the effect is immediate. A hot tingling spreads from your arm, runs up your neck, and reaches your head. Your vision blurs, and for a moment you believe you have made a mistake. But then comes the fear. It hits you like a wave, unexpected and overwhelming. Your breath becomes shallow, your heart races, and the walls around you seem to move, to warp. Shadows dance before your eyes, and a deep, instinctive terror grips you. You fall to the ground, try to scream, but no sound comes from your throat. All you feel is panic, pure, unadulterated panic. And then, it's over. You lie panting on the cold kitchen floor, your body trembling as if you had just escaped a predator. The world is silent, so silent that you can hear your own blood rushing in your ears. The little bottle lies broken next to you. What have you done? You lie on the cold kitchen floor. The tiles beneath you are hard and unyielding. Your breath calms down only slowly as you see the shards of the broken bottle in front of you. The golden liquid has spread into a thin, glittering film on the floor. You are not injured. No physical pain, no side effects, no lasting damage. But something has changed. It was not a physical terror that overwhelmed you. No fear of darkness, heights, or death. It was something deeper, something more personal. While the substance flowed through your body, you saw an abyss. Not just any abyss, your own. You have seen yourself, Harleen. Not the one you show to others, but the one that lies deep within you. The woman who sits alone in her apartment at night, who recoils from Crane's cold, smiling gaze, who remains silent while unspeakable things happen because she is afraid of losing everything. You saw yourself spending years of your life in books, lectures, and endless hours in the lab, only to end up here. To work in a sterile building where people are treated like objects. To be manipulated by a man like Jonathan Crane like a chess piece. And what have you achieved? Nothing. The thought is like a knife. It's not the first time you've had it, but the substance has made it tangible. You saw it, an empty life, a pile of files, a series of faces that will eventually fade from your memory. No trace you leave behind, no meaning. You slowly sit up, your back leaning against the cold kitchen cabinets. Your hands are still trembling, and your thoughts are a furious jumble. It's as if the substance has torn a hole in your mind, through which everything you've held back for so long flows out. You feel anger. On Crane, on that damn lab, on the system that protects such men. But the anger is nothing compared to the guilt, the shame that eats you from the inside out. You wanted to become a psychiatrist to help, to understand people, to change lives. And now you are just a cog in a machine that does the opposite. You stand up, stare at the shards of the bottle, and feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Clarity. The substance hasn't harmed you, but it has shown you what you fear the most, that you are insignificant, that everything you do is just an illusion of control and success. And now, what will you do with this realization? You reach for a towel and wipe up the liquid, gather the shards and throw them in the trash. Your movements are mechanical, as if you were trying to cling to the routine. But something has shifted within you. You go into the bathroom and look in the mirror. Your face is pale, your eyes tired, but you still recognize yourself. Somehow, you look yourself in the eye and ask the question you've been avoiding for years.
What am I doing here?
The answer doesn't come immediately. It doesn't come at all. But the feeling remains, a painful tugging in your chest that you can no longer ignore. That night, you don't sleep. You sit on your sofa, legs drawn up, staring into the darkness while your mind works. Thoughts come and go, memories flash by, plans take shape and then dissipate again. You think of Apollo, of the screams coming from the lower floors. You think of Crane and his triumphant smile when he talks about progress, while ignoring the suffering he causes. You think of yourself, to the Harleen you once were, and to the one you are now. In the morning you have no plan, but you have something you didn't have yesterday, a decision. You will do something. You don't know what, not yet, but you know that you can no longer watch as Crane continues, as Arkham devours you. The substance took something from you, the illusion that everything is fine. And maybe that was the best thing it could do. You get dressed, tie your hair into a tight bun, and put the keys in your pocket. Arkham is waiting, and you have work to do. The night has draped a veil of fog over the city, casting the streetlights in a dim light. You pull your coat tighter around you and take a deep breath. The cold harbor air stings your lungs, but it is refreshing. Your day was a single fog of guilt and contemplation, and now you are trying to dispel the darkness in your head with the darkness outside. It feels better than going straight home, better than the cramped space of your small apartment. You walk slower, letting the harbor sink in. The water sparkles through the fog, and somewhere in the distance, you hear the calls of a seagull. It is almost peaceful until you hear the steps. They are barely perceptible, but they are there behind you, in sync with your own, just a fraction slower. You stop and turn around, but the fog is too thick. You can barely see more than a few meters, but your heart starts to beat faster. Maybe you're just imagining it. Maybe you're just being paranoid, a remnant of last night's events. You keep walking, your steps a bit faster, your hands in your pockets, ready to pull out your phone if necessary. But the footsteps behind you remain, always there, always close. Suddenly, you hear a voice.
Dr. Harleen Quinzel.
You freeze, your breath catches. The voice is deep, quiet, like a whisper that crawls directly into your ears. And it knows your name. Slowly, you turn around, and then you see him. He emerges from the fog like a phantom, a man with pale skin and green hair that almost shimmers in the darkness. His face is distorted by a wide, eerie grin that cuts into your consciousness like a knife. His eyes cold, full of madness, pierce through you, and you feel as if you could hide nowhere.
You look like you've had a tough day today,
he says, his voice almost singing, as if he were mocking you. You take a step back, but he moves closer, slowly, like a predator that doesn't take its eyes off its prey.
Who are you?
Your voice sounds steadier than you feel, but your body trembles uncontrollably. He stands still, his hands casually in the pockets of his purple coat, as if this were a completely ordinary conversation.
Oh, me? I'm just a friend. Call me Joker.
He bows slightly, an exaggerated, mocking gesture that instills a feeling of disgust and fear in you.
What do you want from me?
You know it's a mistake to talk to him, but your legs are paralyzed. Your instinct tells you that running away would be pointless. His smile widens, and he takes another step towards you.
Oh, that's the wrong question, Doctor. The question is, what do you want from yourself?
Your heart is beating faster. How does he know that? How can he know that this question has been haunting you since last night?
I know who you are.
He says, and his voice becomes deeper, darker.
A small, diligent psychiatrist who thinks she's so clever, but is just another pawn in a game she doesn't understand.
That isn't true.
You murmur, but your voice sounds weak. He laughs, a guttural, terrifying sound that echoes off the empty walls of the harbor buildings.
Oh, of course it's true. Look at yourself, Harleen. Don't you work day in and day out to maintain the status quo? Don't you hear the screams? Don't you feel the guilt? But you do nothing. Why?
You are like frozen. It's as if he can see into your mind, revealing all your doubts and fears.
Leave me alone.
You finally say, your voice shaky, but he just shakes his head.
I don't leave anyone alone who is as interesting as you.
His voice is now almost gentle, a dangerous contrast to the words he is saying.
You are a little work of art, Harleen. A work of art made of fear and guilt and insignificance.
Your body tenses as he speaks the last word. He sees it, notices your reaction, and his grin widens even more.
Ah, there it is, the truth. You are afraid that you mean nothing, that your life doesn't matter. But don't worry, I'm here to help you.
You shake your head, take a step back.
You know nothing about me.
Oh, but I do, Harleen. You have a wonderful mask, but I see what's underneath. You feel like a ghost in your own life, don't you? A puppet. Well, I can cut the strings for you.
His words are like poison, and you feel them digging into your mind. You want to run away, want to leave the darkness and the fog behind, but something holds you back.
Why?
You finally whisper.
Why are you doing this?
He laughs softly, and for a moment he almost seems sad, almost human.
Because I hate it when people pretend they have control, Harleen. Because I hate how the world spins as if it makes any sense. You and I, we know better, don't we?
You shake your head, fighting against the words that wrap around your heart like a cold hand.
I am not like you.
He looks at you for a moment. His smile disappears, and what remains is something cold, threatening.
Not yet.
He murmurs. Then he turns around, disappears into the fog, as suddenly as he came. You are left alone. Your heart races, and your breath comes in gasps. His words still echo in your head, and you hate how much they hit you. Slowly, you begin to walk away from the harbor, back to the supposed safety of your life. But deep down, you know that something has changed. He has left a shadow, and you don't know how to get rid of it. The days after the encounter with him blur into a gray, meaningless veil. You go to work, do your job, talk to patients, but something has changed. It feels as if a part of you has remained in that fog at the harbor, where his cold, rough voice cut into your soul. Meaningless. The word echoes in your head like a sound you can't shake off, no matter how hard you try to push it away. The Joker had no reason to know so much about you, but he knew it. Everything. Your doubts, your weaknesses, the fear you had hidden from yourself. And now it's as if he has burst open that door inside you and forced you to look inside. You sit at your desk in the lab, staring at the files piling up in front of you, and you don't even hear Crane enter the room.
Dr. Quinzel.
His voice is as sharp and precise as a scalpel, and you flinch.
Yes?
You turn to him, your voice sounding firmer than you feel.
I addressed you 3 times.
His icy eyes scrutinize you, and you feel your stomach tighten.
Is something wrong?
No.
You answer quickly, maybe too quickly.
Everything is fine. I just didn't get enough sleep.
He raises an eyebrow as if he doesn't believe you, but he says nothing. Instead, he slides a folder over to you.
Here is the report on the latest experiments. I expect your analysis by tomorrow morning.
You nod and reach for the folder, but your hands tremble slightly, and you hate yourself for him noticing.
Maybe you should take an evening off, Dr. Quinzel.
He says finally, a hint of mockery in his voice.
You seem distracted.
You don't answer, and he leaves, leaving the air in the room heavy and oppressive. You look at the folder in front of you, but the words blur before your eyes. Instead, you see him again, emerging from the fog, with that eerie grin that was both mocking and hypnotic. Puppet, you stand up, push your chair back, and leave the lab. Your colleagues give you puzzled looks, but you ignore them. You need some fresh air. You find yourself in the city later without really knowing how you ended up there. Your legs have led you through the streets as if by themselves, away from Arkham, away from everything. But it's as if you are being watched. You pause, take a deep breath, try to sort out the thoughts in your head. But the feeling remains, a piercing, gnawing feeling that you are not alone.
Are you looking for me, Harleen?
The voice is gentle, almost playful, and your heart skips a beat. You turn around, and there he is again, leaning against an old street lamp, his hands in his pockets, his grin as wide as the night before.
What do you want from me?
Your voice trembles, but you force yourself to stand your ground, not to back down. He steps closer, slowly savoring it, as if he had all the time in the world.
You crossed my path, didn't you? Or was it coincidence? Maybe fate?
Stop playing with me.
You try to sound firm, but he laughs softly, a deep, guttural tone that gets under your skin.
Oh, I don't play, Harleen. I inspire. Look at you. You are a perfect example of what I love to see the most. You are trying so desperately to hold on to this small, boring life, even though you know it suffocates you.
You want to retort, scream at him, silence him, but his words hit you like knives.
Why are you still working there?
He makes a theatrical gesture as if he already knows the answer.
Oh, I know. You want to help. You want to save people. But that's a lie, isn't it? You can't save anyone, not even yourself.
You know nothing about me.
He stops, looks at you, and for a moment, there's something in his eyes, something that makes you freeze.
I know more than you would like, Harleen. I see how lost you are. And I see that you are wondering if there is still a way out.
You feel tears welling up in your eyes, but you blink them away. You don't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing you break.
What do you want?
You whisper, and this time your voice sounds as weak as you feel. His grin sharpens, darkens, and he leans slightly towards you until his words seem to crawl directly into your ear.
I want to show you that you don't have to be afraid of the abyss. That there is freedom in letting everything go.
He leans back, looks at you, and you don't know if the sparkle in his eyes is madness or something else.
But you can't see that as long as you hold on to your little world. So I ask you, Harleen, what really keeps you from being yourself?
He turns around and disappears into the shadows before you can respond. But his words linger, deep in your mind, like a poison that slowly spreads. What really prevents you from being yourself? The days pass by as if in a trance. You go to work, complete your tasks, answer your colleagues' questions, nod, smile, but none of it feels real. Your movements are mechanical, your smile hollow, and every minute of your life seems to become heavier, as if the world around you is fading while something darker, deeper takes shape in your mind. His words haunt you, not like a memory, but like a shadow that pushes into every corner of your consciousness.
What is stopping you from being yourself?
It is a simple question, and yet you feel overwhelmed by it. You lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, the light from the street lamps casting moving patterns on the walls, and you desperately try to find an answer. What is stopping you? At first, you try to ignore the question. You throw yourself into your work, put in overtime, write reports, dive deeper into Crane's research than you would like. But none of it gives you back the feeling of control. The question remains, digging deeper, and with each passing day, you feel less like the Harleen Quinzel you once were. You begin to see your surroundings differently. The sterile, cold environment of the lab suddenly feels like a prison. The faces of your colleagues, their forced smiles and empty conversations, seem like masks to you. Even Crane, with his calculating presence and quiet sadism, seems to you less like a human and more like a cog in a machine that exists only to sustain itself. The world feels like a carousel that keeps spinning, without purpose, without meaning. You see yourself as part of it, a puppet, as he said. And then, one night, while you're lying awake again, the thought comes that changes everything. What if he's right? It hits you like a shock, but at the same time it feels liberating. What if everything you have worked for, all the years of your life, is truly meaningless? What if the meaning you so desperately seek never existed? Instead of feeling fear, you feel emptiness. And in this emptiness lies a strange kind of peace. The harbor area calls you again. It is late, much later than you would normally be out, and the streets are quiet and deserted. The fog hangs heavily in the air, and you feel the cold on your skin, but it doesn't bother you. It's as if you are searching for something you can't name, something that drives you even though you're not sure what it is. And then he's back again. Out of nowhere, he steps out of the shadows, just like last time, as if he had been waiting for you to arrive. His silhouette is tall and slender, his coat framing him like the curtain of a stage, and that grin, that eternal, mocking grin, is the first thing you recognize in the darkness.
Ah, there she is again.
He says, and his voice sounds like a promise.
The lost little doctor.
You stop, your heart beats faster, but this time it's not just fear that you feel. There is something else, something you can't quite grasp.
I didn't want to come here.
You say, even though you know it's a lie. He laughs softly, and the sound sends a shiver down your spine.
Of course you wanted that. You can't fool yourself, Harleen. I'm just one step ahead of you.
Why? Why are you following me?
Your voice trembles, but this time you hold his gaze. He steps closer, slowly, savoring it until he is right in front of you.
Follow?
He tilts his head, his green hair shimmering in the dim light.
I don't follow anyone. You are the one who came back. Maybe because you felt that I had told you the truth.
What kind of truth?
He leans slightly towards you, his face so close to yours that you can feel his breath.
The truth that you live in a cage. That everything you hold on to is just an illusion. Your work, your life, your belief in meaning. But you know better, don't you?
You open your mouth to object, but the words stick in your throat. Because he is right. He sees it in your face, sees the brief moment of hesitation, and his grin widens.
That's what I like about you, Harleen. You are not like the others. You are not trying to lie to yourself. Not anymore. And that makes you free.
Free?
You whisper, as if you had heard the word for the first time. He nods, and his eyes shine in the dark.
Freedom does not lie in control, Harleen. Freedom lies in letting go of everything. The rules, the expectations, the fears. And when you do that, you will finally live.
His words grip you, pull you deeper, and for a moment you feel as if the world around you is fading away.
Why should I trust you?
You finally ask, your voice quiet. He leans back, crosses his arms, and looks at you as if he were studying you.
Oh, I never said you should trust me. But think about it, Harleen. What do you have to lose?
He turns around, disappears back into the darkness, and you are left alone. His words echo in your head, and you feel something within you beginning to change. Freedom lies in letting go of everything. The days after your encounter feel strangely unreal, like a prolonged nightmare or a movie playing on repeat. But this time, it's not just the weight of work or the emptiness of your everyday life that overwhelms you. It's something else, something that goes deeper. His words have broken something in you, a crack in the foundation on which you have built your entire life.
Freedom lies in letting go of everything.
At first, you try to push the idea away from you. You throw yourself back into your usual routine, as if you could hide from the thoughts that torment you. But it doesn't work. His voice echoes within you, and with each passing day, it becomes harder to ignore. You sit in your office, the file of a patient open in front of you, but you have no idea what is written there. The letters blur before your eyes, and all you feel is this nagging discomfort.
What is stopping you from being free?
The question resurfaces, relentless as a storm. You try to suppress it, to cling to your education, your title, your profession. All the things that tell you that you are someone. But the more you try to hold on to them, the more you realize how fragile these things are. What does your job mean if you are just a cog in a cold, merciless machine? What does your title mean if you only earned it through conformity and silence? And what does your life mean if you go through the same empty routines every day without ever feeling like you're truly living? It's as if someone is pulling a curtain away from you, and what's behind it is not the world you had imagined. It is a gray, meaningless void. You think of Dr. Crane, his icy voice, his unwavering gaze, the way he manipulates you. You think of the patients in Arkham, whom he uses like guinea pigs, and how you looked the other way because you were afraid of losing your job. But now you're asking yourself, why? Why did you allow it? Why did you put yourself in a position where you can't do the right thing? Freedom lies in letting go of everything. The words burn in your head, and you wonder what you even have left that you could let go of. One evening, when you come home, you stand in the hallway and look around your apartment. The furniture you carefully selected, the books that are neatly arranged on the shelves, the picture frames on the walls that are supposed to remind you of past times but mean nothing to you anymore. Everything is so empty. You sit on the sofa and stare into nothingness. The thoughts swirl in your head, and for the first time you let them in. You let the doubts flood you. Let the Joker's words take up space inside you. You wonder why you cling so tightly to this life when it suffocates you. What if freedom doesn't lie in all these things, but in letting them go? The next day, you go to work as usual, but it feels different. You see the colleagues who greet you, but their voices sound dull, far away. You hear Crane speaking, but his words slide off you as if he were talking to someone else. And when you see a patient, a man so broken by Crane's experiments that he can't even speak anymore, you wonder why you're even here. You are no better than Crane. You are just a bystander with your hands in your pockets while the world around you is on fire. This thought haunts you all day, and when you walk through the harbor area again in the evening, you know that you are actually looking for him. You don't want it to be this way, but it is true. You want to find him. You want to find out why his words affect you so much, why they feel like the only truth you've ever heard. And when he finally stands in front of you again, with that mocking, knowing grin, you feel as if you are coming home.
I knew you would come back,
he says, and his voice sounds like a mix of triumph and mockery.
I saw it in your eyes, Harleen. You can't deny it, not standing in front of me and certainly not in front of yourself.
You say nothing. You can't.
It hurts, doesn't it?
He steps closer, his eyes boring into yours.
To see how pointless all of this is. To realize that you are just a small cog in a huge, absurd machine. But do you know what hurts even more?
He stops, his face so close to yours that you can feel his breath.
To know that you have the power to change something, but you are afraid to do so.
Your breath catches, and you feel his words pulling you deeper.
Why are you here, Harleen?
He asks, his grin as wide as the night.
What are you looking for?
You open your mouth, want to say something, but nothing comes out. Because you don't know, or because you know it and don't want to say it. He sees it in your face, and his laughter echoes through the empty streets.
Oh, Harleen, you are so close. So close to understanding what really matters.
And what matters?
You finally whisper, your voice barely more than a breath. He steps even closer, and for a moment you see nothing but his eyes.
Freedom,
he says, and the word sounds like a promise, like a curse, like everything you have ever wanted. The weeks go by, and you feel as if you are wandering through a labyrinth where every path leads into darkness. The shadows of the harbor and the words of the Joker accompany you, even in the moments when you are alone. You search for answers, for clarity, for a way out, but all you find is him. His voice, his eyes, his mocking grin. They haunt you even when you don't see him. He has planted a seed in you, and it is growing slowly, inevitably. It is late in the evening when you decide to take a different route home. The day in the lab was long, and Crane's rigid, calculating presence drained you more than usual. You feel the cold of the night on your skin, but it calms you. You take a deep breath, the smell of damp concrete and distant salt in the air. The streets are quiet, almost empty, until you suddenly hear footsteps behind you. You turn around, and there they are. 3 men, their faces half hidden in the dim light of a lantern. Their posture is relaxed, yet something dangerous glimmers in their eyes, something that immediately makes you sit up and take notice.
Well, what is a woman like you doing out here alone so late?
The tallest of them steps closer, his smile oily, his voice smug. You feel your pulse quicken. Your gaze wanders over the alley, but there is no escape. Only darkness and the three men who are slowly approaching.
I don't want any trouble.
You say, your voice calm, even though your heart is racing.
Oh, neither do we.
Says another, a scrawnier guy with a cigarette in his mouth.
We just want a little company.
They laugh, and the sound sends a shiver down your spine. Your thoughts are racing. You are not a fighter, and no one will hear you here. A part of you wonders if this is your punishment for all the years of silence, of looking the other way, of going along with it. But before they can come closer, you hear another sound. Footsteps, slow and steady, echoing through the silence.
Oh, boys,
Says a familiar voice, calm yet infused with a strange, almost playful threat.
that was really the wrong woman.
The men turn around, and your gaze follows them. There he stands, the Joker, wrapped in his long coat, the grin on his face as wide as ever.
Who the hell are you?
Asks the tallest, but his voice sounds less certain. The Joker stops, tilts his head slightly, and looks at them like a predator playing with its prey.
Me? Oh, I'm nobody special. But she,
He points a finger at you, and his gaze meets yours, intense and unavoidable.
she belongs to me.
Your breath catches, and for a moment, you're not sure what shakes you more, the threat of the men or the possessiveness in his voice.
Oh, really?
The biggest steps forward, his chest puffed out with false courage.
And what do you want to do, clown?
The Joker laughs. It is a rough, dark sound that fills the alley and makes the men hesitate. Then he pulls something from his coat. A knife, long and sharp, that glints in the pale light.
That
He says, his grin wider than ever.
is going to be fun.
What follows happens so quickly that you can barely register what is happening. The Joker moves with an unexpected grace, his knife a flickering flash in the darkness. The men fight back, but they stand no chance against him. He is merciless, efficient, almost like a dancer performing a deadly choreography. When it's all over, the men lie moaning and bleeding on the ground, and the Joker stands over them, his breath calm, as if nothing has happened.
Well, I guess that's it, boys.
He says with one last mocking glance before turning to you. Your body is frozen in shock, and you don't know what to say. He steps closer, and for the first time, you see something in his eyes that is not pure amusement. It is dark, intense fire that holds you and doesn't let go.
You should be more careful, Harleen.
He says softly, and his voice is almost gentle.
The world out there is full of monsters.
You finally manage to speak, even though your voice trembles.
You're a monster too.
He laughs softly, a dry, guttural sound.
Oh, I know that. But unlike those guys,
He nods towards the men lying on the ground.
I know what I want.
And what do you want?
You ask, even though you fear the answer. He steps so close to you that you can feel his breath on your skin.
I want you to understand that no one can possess you except me.
The words are like a blow, and you feel them fill you up, hold you tight. You want to be angry to defend yourself, but a part of you, a small, dark part, feels safe in his presence.
Why?
You nod and reach for the folder, but your hands tremble slightly, and you hate yourself for him noticing.
Because you belong to me, Harleen.
He says, and in that moment, you can't decide whether to run away or believe him. The fog hangs heavily in the air, swallowing the sounds of the alley and enveloping the scene in an eerie silence. The men writhe on the ground, groaning and defeated, but they are no longer important. All that matters is the eerie closeness between you and the man in front of you. You stand there, motionless, your heart pounding in your chest. He is so close that you can see every shadow in his eyes, a dance of madness, contempt, and something else, something you can't name.
I didn't have to do it, you know?
He suddenly says, his voice strangely quiet.
I could have just ignored them. But
His fingers move as if he wants to grasp the words out of the air.
I guess I don't like it when someone fiddles with my things.
You should be angry, maybe offended, because he treats you like an object. But there is something in his voice, in his gaze, that makes you pause. An undertone that you can't quite grasp.
I don't belong to you.
You finally say, your voice quiet but firm. His grin widens, darkens.
No?
He tilts his head, almost playfully.
Then tell me why you keep coming near me.
You open your mouth, but the words stick in your throat. You have no answer, or at least none that you want to say out loud. He seems to notice it, for he laughs softly, that rough, guttural deep laugh that goes through your marrow and bones.
I thought so.
The Joker takes a step back, but his eyes remain on you as if studying every move you make.
You know, Harleen, you can tell yourself the lies you need to sleep at night. But you and I...
He makes a vague gesture between you, as if outlining an invisible connection.
We are more alike than you think.
I don't believe that.
You reply quickly, and although your voice is firm, you feel a spark of doubt gnawing at you. He shrugs his shoulders, a smile on his lips that almost seems gentle.
Maybe not now, but someday you will see it. Maybe you will even be grateful.
You want to retort, something clever or cutting, but he takes another step back, turns halfway around, and looks into the misty darkness of the alley.
But why?
You suddenly whisper before you can stop yourself. He stands still, his back to you. For a moment, you think he won't answer. But then he speaks, his voice almost a whisper that penetrates the night.
Because it suits you well, Harleen.
He says,
The fire in your eyes when you talk to me. The way you want to fight, even though you know you'll lose.
He turns his head slightly to the side, just enough for you to see his profile, a shadow of a smile on his lips.
That is fascinating.
Your heart races and you hate yourself a little for it, for the trembling in your chest, the warm tingling that his words provoke. You hate that he might be right.
I don't need you.
You finally say, a desperate attempt to regain control. He laughs softly, turns completely around, and steps closer again. This time his gaze is different, less mocking, less scornful. There is a strange calmness in his eyes, an intensity that leaves you speechless.
I know that.
He says softly, his voice gentle, almost tender.
But what if you want me?
You swallow, unable to break his gaze. Something inside you screams that you should run away, that you must not let yourself be drawn into this game. But you don't move.
I don't want anything from you.
You finally whisper, but the words sound hollow, even to your own ears. He smiles, and this time it's not a broad grin. It is small, almost hesitant, as if he himself were surprised.
We'll see about that, Harleen.
He murmurs, and before you can respond, he turns away, walks slowly down the alley, and disappears into the fog. You are left behind, alone with your thoughts, your racing heart, and the uncomfortable truth that he occupies more space in your life than you would like to admit. The night is quiet, but a storm rages within you. You want to forget him, banish him from your thoughts, but instead, you feel his words echoing within you. Freedom, control, and the question of whether you really don't want him, or if you're just afraid to admit it. The walk back to your apartment feels like an eternity. The cool night air, which usually calms you, now clings to your shoulders like a heavy weight. Your thoughts race, jumping between the faces of the men in the alley, Crane's constant pressure at work, and the grin that has burned itself into your memory like a brand. You close the door behind you, turn the key in the lock, and lean against the wood. Your hands are shaking. Your whole body is shaking. Your breath comes in gasps, and suddenly everything hits you like a flood. The tightness in your chest, the nausea that has been brewing all evening, becomes unbearable. You barely make it to the bathroom before your stomach cramps. You kneel in front of the toilet, your hair sticking to your sweat-drenched face as your body forces you to release all the tension and fear. Tears run down your cheeks, and you would wipe them away if your hands weren't gripping the edge of the toilet bowl. When it's over, you sit there, the floor beneath you cold, and your head falls heavily against the wall. You take a deep breath, exhale slowly, trying to calm your racing pulse. But the lump in your throat remains. You think of the day of Crane's gaze when he watched you in the lab, as if he knew exactly how much you were struggling with yourself. You think of the men in the alley, the feeling of helplessness that almost overwhelmed you. And then you think of him, to the knife in his hand, to the tone of his voice when he defended you.
She belongs to me.
The words still echo in your head, like a song you can't turn off. You hate him, and yet you hate yourself more because you can't just ignore him. Feels like your life is slowly suffocating you. The work, the guilt, the thoughts of him, they all build up as if they want to crush you. You no longer know who you are, who you want to be. With trembling hands, you straighten up, flush the toilet, and lean on the sink. Your reflection stares back at you, a pale, tired face, with red eyes and disheveled hair. It looks like you, but it doesn't feel like you. You turn on the faucet, splash cold water on your face. The cold brings you back to the here and now a little, but the thoughts remain. You turn off the light in the bathroom, wander aimlessly around your apartment, before sinking down onto the sofa. The silence is deafening. You wish your phone would ring, that someone would pull you out of this moment, but that doesn't happen. You are alone with your thoughts, alone with the question of how it could have come to this. And then, as unexpectedly as a lightning bolt in the dark, you think of what the Joker said.
What if you want me?
The words burn in your head, and you hate that they comfort you in any way. There is nothing comforting about him, and yet, in his world, there are no masks, no hypocrisy. Everything he says is raw, unfiltered, real, and you can't deny that a part of you wants that. Freedom. The word comes up again, and you feel your eyes grow heavy. Your thoughts drift like fog through your mind until you finally fall into a restless sleep. In your dreams, you are back in the alley, but this time you are alone. No Joker, no men, just you and the endless feeling of helplessness. You want to scream, run away, fight, but your legs won't move, and your voice remains silent. And then he appears, like a shadow slowly forming out of the darkness. His smile is there, but it's different, softer, almost comforting.
Harleen.
He whispers, and his voice cuts through the silence like a knife.
Why are you fighting so hard?
You want to say something, but the words stick in your throat.
You could be free.
He murmurs, and his hand reaches out to grasp yours. His touch is warm, despite the cold around you. You wake up, your heart pounding in your chest, and the dream burns into your consciousness like an indelible memory. The next day, you push the dream aside, but it lingers like an unwelcome guest in the back of your mind. You try to focus on the work, on Crane's relentless instructions and the data you are supposed to analyze, but your thoughts keep drifting away. You feel torn, like a puppet whose strings are held by too many puppeteers. But who really holds the strings? Crane? The Joker? Or yourself? A question lingers, tormenting and relentless. What does freedom really mean? And what are you willing to do for it? The days pass by, but the darkness that has taken root within you does not recede. You function work, nod politely in meetings, present your analyses, while Crane scrutinizes you with his cold, calculating eyes. But inside you feel hollow, broken. It's not just the screaming guilt because you know what Crane is doing and yet do nothing about it. It's not just the expectations that weigh heavily on you, like invisible chains binding you tighter and tighter to a place you hate. It is him, his words, his presence, the unmistakable tingling in your neck that has crept back in night after night. You can no longer count how many times you have turned around in the darkness of your apartment, convinced that he is lurking somewhere in the shadows, only to find that you are alone. But even when he is not there, it feels as if he has already taken you in his hand, pulled you into a part of his merciless world without you having a choice. You are fighting against it. Rationally, you know that he is dangerous, that he will only drag you into the abyss. But the more you try to resist him, the stronger the pull will become. It's one of those nights that finally breaks you. You can't sleep. You can't think. Your apartment feels too small, the walls too close, the space suffocates you. So you put on a coat and step out into the night. You tell yourself that you just need some fresh air, but deep down you know where your feet will take you. The alleys of the harbor area are empty. Only the faint smell of salt water and decay accompanies your steps. The fog hovers like a living being over the streets, swallowing every sound except for the faint echo of your heels. You try to remember why you are here, why you didn't just lie down on the couch to distract yourself with a book. But deep inside you know the answer, and then he is there. It doesn't begin with a sound, but with a presence. A shiver down your spine that makes you stop. You turn around, and there he is leaning against the brick wall of a warehouse, hands casually in his pockets, the unmistakable smile on his lips.
You really make it easy for me, Harleen,
he says, his voice sweet yet cutting.
Always out here, all alone. Either you want to die, or you want to see me.
Your heartbeat quickens, your mouth goes dry. You know you should leave, that you should lift your head, ignore him, and flee back to the safety of your four walls. But you can't.
I wanted some fresh air.
You say, and you hate how weak your voice sounds. He laughs, a guttural, dark sound that sends a shiver down your spine.
Fresh air. Of course. And you thought to yourself, hey, I'll just go to the place where I was almost killed. Makes total sense.
You want to say something clever, something that frees you from this situation, but he steps closer, and suddenly your breath is caught.
You lie, Harleen,
he says, his smile widening.
But that's okay. I like that. It just makes the truth more interesting when it finally comes out.
I'm not here because of you.
You contradict, and this time your voice is firmer. He stops, just a few steps away from you. You can perceive the faint smell of smoke and metal that surrounds him. His head tilts slightly to the side as he examines you, like a puzzle he wants to solve.
Maybe not consciously.
He finally says, his voice soft, almost soothing.
But something in you has decided that you need me. And I wonder why.
His words cut deep, hitting you in a place you have so carefully hidden from yourself. You feel the heat in your face, the weakness in your legs.
I don't need you.
You finally say, and it feels like a lie even as you say it.
No?
He takes another step towards you, and you feel your body tense up.
Then tell me why you keep ending up here. Why you don't leave, even though I'm exactly the kind of monster you should run away from.
Because
you hesitate, searching for an answer that makes sense. But you don't find any. His grin widens, triumphant.
Because I'm going to show you something you won't find anywhere else.
He raises a hand very slowly, as if he wants to give you time to back away. But you don't. His fingers lightly brush over your chin, lifting your gaze to his.
I'll show you who you really are.
He whispers, and his breath brushes your skin. You should push him away, scream, do something to break this moment. But instead, you just stand there, frozen in his presence, lost in the words he whispers in your ear.
There are no masks, no lies, no rules in my world, Harleen. Only freedom. And you know that you want it.
His words are poison, and yet you feel yourself absorbing them as if they were the only truth left to you.
you are crazy.
You whisper, but even as you say it, you feel your world revolving around him. He laughs, and that laughter is the last thing you hear before he steps back and leaves you alone in the cold, foggy alley, with your racing heartbeat and a truth you can no longer deny. You want the freedom he promises, and that scares you more than anything else. The day begins like any other, with a sleepless night behind you and the paralyzing feeling of being trapped in a life you no longer control. You dress mechanically, grab your documents, and set off for work. Everything feels like a dull fog, a gray, relentless routine that pulls you deeper and deeper. In the lab, Crane is already waiting, as always cold and aloof, with a hint of arrogance in his movements. You notice the tension in the air, the underlying pressure that fills every room he occupies.
Dr. Quinzel.
He says with his unmistakable voice that sends shivers down your spine every time.
We have a new case today. An extremely interesting patient.
You want to object, to say something that pulls you out of this situation, but his eyes fixate on you, and you feel like an insect being examined under a microscope. He leads you into a small observation room from which you can see through a one-way window into a bare cell. Inside sits a man, his hands trembling, his eyes wide open. You immediately recognize the symptoms: severe anxiety, paranoia, perhaps triggered by trauma or substances.
He was one of our long-term patients.
Explains Crane, standing next to you.
I have developed a new protocol to alleviate his anxiety. It is experimental, but I am convinced that it will be effective.
You freeze. You know what that means. The protocol is nothing more than a pretext to test his psychoactive substances. Your mouth opens to protest, but Crane's gaze slides to you, sharp and penetrating.
Is something wrong, Dr. Quinzel?
He asks with a slight hint of mockery in his voice. You swallow your words. You know it doesn't make sense. He is not only your superior, but also someone who possesses a power that you cannot risk turning against you. So you stand silently by as the test begins. It happens quickly. The patient is restrained. A small dose of the serum is injected. You watch as his breathing quickens. His eyes widen even further. He begins to scream, a piercing, inhuman sound that makes your blood run cold.
Fascinating,
Murmurs Crane as he takes notes.
His reaction is more intense than expected, possibly an increased sensitivity to the substance.
You can't bear to look anymore. The man's scream echoes in your head. And you feel yourself getting nauseous. Your stomach tightens, your hands tremble. You want to run away, stop him, do something, but you are paralyzed. Then the man collapses. Silence. Only the buzzing of the neon lights in the room. Crane looks over at you, a satisfied smile on his face.
See, Dr. Quinzel? Science requires sacrifice. Remember that.
You nod weakly, unable to say anything. You don't know how you'll get through the rest of the day. You only function like a machine, completing your tasks mechanically, without really being present. But inside you, something is boiling, a seething mixture of guilt, anger, and fear that is pushing closer to the surface. When you finally finish work, you are at the end of your strength. Your feet do not carry you home, but once again to the harbor. You don't know why, but something is pulling you there, like an invisible force. The fog is thick, almost impenetrable, as you walk through the dark alleys. Your thoughts are a chaotic jumble. The patient's screams still echo in your head, mingling with Crane's words and the Joker's smile lurking in your subconscious. Finally, you reach the quay. The air smells of salt and decay, and the sound of water crashing against the pier is the only thing that drowns out your thoughts. And then you break down. You sink to your knees, your shoulders trembling, and the tears you have held back for so long finally flow out. Your hands grasp the cold, damp earth, and a scream escapes your throat, raw, desperate, full of pain.
Why?
You shout into the void, your voice trembling.
Why can't I just be free?
You don't know if you're talking to yourself or someone else, but the words just keep coming.
I hate this. I hate what I am. I hate that I'm doing nothing. I hate that
Your voice breaks off as you realize that you are no longer alone. He stands there, just a few steps away, and watches you. The grin on his face is not as wide this time as usual. It's almost contemplative.
You look like shit, Harleen.
Says the Joker, his voice soft but with a hint of mockery. You sniffle and try to pull yourself together, but your body doesn't obey you. Instead, you simply sink back to the ground, unable to hide the pain inside you. He steps closer, slowly, almost cautiously, as if he isn't sure whether he should touch you. Then he kneels down, his face at eye level with yours.
Life has really played a dirty trick on you, hasn't it?
He murmurs, and his words are so gentle that they throw you off balance.
You don't understand.
You whisper, your voice hoarse.
Oh, I understand more than you think.
He says, and for a moment, there's something in his eyes, a depth you wouldn't have expected. You don't know what compels you, but you tell him everything. About Crane, about the experiments, about the guilt that consumes you. The words pour out of you unfiltered, raw, as he listens to you. And when you're done, there's no judgment on his face. Just that grin which almost seems proud.
See?
He finally says,
I told you that the world would break you. But do you know what the beautiful thing about it is?
You shake your head, unable to respond.
When you are broken, you can put yourself back together.
He says, and this time his grin is wide, wild, full of energy.
But this time on your own terms.
His words strike something within you, something that had been deeply hidden. And although a part of you knows that you should run away, you feel the darkness pulling you deeper in, and how a hint of freedom lies hidden within it. You are still sitting on the cold ground of the quay, the damp air enveloping you like a heavy cloak. Your breath is uneven, and the tears have blurred your vision. The Joker remains kneeling directly in front of you. His smile has turned into a gentler expression, almost intimate.
You know,
He says quietly,
most people don't recognize their chains. They live in their pretty little prison, call it everyday life, and believe it is freedom.
His voice is a mixture of mockery and seduction, and you feel it winding around your heart, like an invisible hand holding you tight. You want to argue, to tell him that he is wrong, that you are not living in chains, but the truth lies like a cold stone in your chest.
And you, Harleen,
He continues, his eyes laser-focused on yours.
you have recognized it. You see the walls around you. That makes you special.
Your throat is dry, but you manage to produce a hoarse.
Special?
He laughs softly, a rough, guttural sound that is strangely soothing.
Oh yes, most would defend their chains with claws and teeth. But you have the courage to hate them.
His words hit you like a blow, and before you can hold back, you shake your head.
That's not courage. That is weakness. I am broken.
Broken?
He leans closer to you, so close that you can smell the scent of smoke and metal that surrounds him.
Harleen, broken is just another word for free. Once you've lost everything that holds you back, you can fly. You know that deep down inside.
You want to run away, want to break this moment, but instead you stay as if petrified, while he lifts a hand and gently brushes your cheek. It is such a surprisingly tender gesture that it takes your breath away.
The world has betrayed you.
He murmurs, his thumb gliding over your cheek where the tears have left their marks.
And I will show you how you can take revenge.
Your mind screams that this is wrong, that you should run away, that you must distance yourself from him before he finally pulls you into his darkness. But your body doesn't obey. Instead, you just sit there like a bird in a cage that suddenly stands open, but doesn't know how to fly.
I can't.
You finally whisper, and your voice breaks.
I don't know how.
His grin widens, his eyes sparkle with something that almost looks like triumph.
Then let me show you.
He leans even closer to you, and for a moment, everything else has disappeared. The cold night, the fog, the screams that haunt you. There is only him, his face so close to yours that you can feel his breath on your lips.
You deserve to be free, Harleen.
He whispers, and his voice is like poison and honey at the same time.
And you know that I am the only one who can give you that.
You close your eyes because the pain raging inside you is too much to bear. But in the darkness of your closed eyelids, you feel him pulling you closer, resting his forehead against yours. It is no longer a threat. It's not manipulation. In that moment, it's just him, a man who is just as broken as you are, and you, a woman who no longer has the strength to fight back. And then it happens. His lips touch yours, gently, almost hesitantly, like a question he doesn't dare to ask. You are too exhausted to pull away, too tired to resist. So you let it happen. His kiss is surprisingly warm, despite the cold around you. It is not pure lust, not a claim of possession. It is something else, an unspoken plea, a promise that he will lead you into the darkness, but that you will never be alone. When he finally pulls away, you slowly open your eyes and look at him. His smile is still there, but this time it is softer, less mocking.
Now you really belong to me,
He says, and although the words should be a warning, you feel something within you respond to this idea, something you can't deny. Maybe you never really listened to yourself. Maybe you have always been lost. And maybe, just maybe, this is the first step to finding yourself.
Show me.
You whisper, your voice barely audible.
Show me how I can be free.
He grins, and in his eyes, something glitters that feels like triumph and affection at the same time.
Oh, I will, Harleen. I will.
And in that moment, you let yourself fall into the darkness he offers you, and into the freedom you have long sought. The following days are like a trance. You function as you always do, go to work, listen to Crane's monotonous orders, and endure the endless spiral of guilt and fear. But something has changed. Deep within you, a crack has formed through which the darkness the Joker showed you seeps. Every time you look in a mirror, you feel like you're looking into the eyes of a stranger. The woman staring back at you is no longer the insecure, dutiful Dr. Harleen Quinzel. She is something new, something uncontrollable. At work, the situation is escalating. Crane is tenser than usual, more unpredictable. There are rumors about an upcoming inspection, and you can see the facade of his cold professionalism slowly cracking.
Dr. Quinzel.
He says one afternoon in his office, pacing back and forth like a caged predator.
If anyone asks questions, remember your loyalty. Without me, you would be nothing. Do we understand each other?
You nod, but inside you're seething. Loyalty? The word sounds like mockery. You are not loyal to him. You are trapped. That evening, you don't go home right away. The pressure of the day, Crane's threats, the unbearable guilt you carry with you, all of this drives you back to the harbor. The fog is denser than ever, and the darkness seems alive. You wander aimlessly until you stop at a deserted corner of the pier. The waves crash against the old wooden posts, and the silence is only broken by the occasional creak of the wood. You lean against the railing and take a deep breath. For the first time today, you feel alone, truly alone. But the emptiness that usually torments you feels different this time.
I knew you would come here.
His voice is like a knife cutting through the silence, and you feel your heart skip a beat. Slowly, you turn around, and there he stands, casually leaning against an old metal container, a cigarette between his fingers. The Joker.
You really should be more careful, Harleen.
He says with a crooked grin.
There are many evil people out there.
You laugh dryly, even though you don't know why. Maybe because the irony is too heavy to ignore.
Like you?
He shrugs and steps closer.
Me? I am harmless compared to what you have to endure every day.
You want to contradict him, but the words stick in your throat. He is right, and you both know it.
Why are you here?
You finally ask, your voice quieter than you intended. He stands still, just a step away from you, and tilts his head as if studying you.
Because I wanted to see if you survived. Everyday life, I mean.
You snort and turn your gaze away.
Hardly.
Hardly counts.
He says with a slight smile that almost seems honest.
You are still here. That's all that matters.
His words are so simple, so direct, that they break something inside you. You feel the tears returning, but you fight against them.
Why are you doing this?
You finally whisper.
Why are you trying to save me?
He laughs, a deep, rough sound that echoes in the night.
Oh, Harleen, I won't save you. I will break you. And once you are broken into 1,000 pieces, we will make something beautiful out of it.
The words should scare you, should make you angry, but instead, you feel something completely different. You feel seen. Not as the cool, rational psychiatrist you pretend to be, but as the chaotic, vulnerable woman you truly are.
You are crazy.
You say softly, and for the first time that evening, you truly smile.
And you are too.
He replies, his grin widening. He steps even closer until he is right in front of you. So close that you can smell the smoke and sharpness of his breath. You should step back, should push him away, but you don't. Instead, you look into his eyes, searching for something you can't name.
Do you know what I like about you, Harleen?
He asks softly, his voice almost a whisper.
What?
He raises a hand and brushes a strand of hair from your face.
You are fighting. You try to defend yourself. But deep down, you know you can't win this. And that makes you perfect.
The words are like a blow, but not painful. They hit you in a place you didn't even know existed. You open your mouth to say something, but before you can respond, he closes the gap between you. His lips are on yours, demanding, unyielding, but not violent. It is a kiss that says everything words cannot, about control, about freedom, about darkness and desire. And you kiss him back. For a moment, there is no guilt, no fear, no chains. There is only him, the darkness he embodies, and the freedom he promises you. When he finally pulls away, you look at him, your breathing heavy, your heart racing.
I warned you.
He says with a crooked smile, his fingers still lightly on your chin.
You belong to me.
You should be scared, you should be angry, but you feel none of it. Instead, you nod slowly, almost imperceptibly. Maybe you belong to him. Maybe you belong to no one, not even yourself. But in this moment, it doesn't matter, because for the first time in your life, you feel alive. The following night passes like a blur. When you wake up the next morning in your small apartment, the world seems to stand still. The fog has lifted. The first rays of sunlight penetrate through the thin curtains, and for a moment, everything seems normal. But nothing is normal. Nothing will ever be normal again. You feel it immediately, like an old skin that has been shed, something that no longer belongs to you. Harleen Quinzel is left behind somewhere, a shell you no longer need. You sit on the edge of the bed, the blanket wrapped around you, and your gaze falls on the notes and books you once maintained so meticulously. All that knowledge, all those successes, all those efforts, they suddenly feel hollow, like the echo of a life that never belonged to you. A soft knock pulls you out of your thoughts. It is not a timid knock, but a rhythmic, playful sound that you have come to know by now. Your heart beats faster as you walk to the door and open it. He stands there, the Joker, in all his eccentric splendor. A tailored purple suit, the shirt slightly wrinkled, the grin as always too wide for his face. In his hands, he holds a small paper bag.
Breakfast?
He asks as if this were the most normal thing in the world. You blink at him, surprised, but before you can say anything, he just walks in and settles down on your couch as if he belongs here.
You've had a lot to think about, huh?
He asks as he opens the bag and pulls out 2 croissants. You sit across from him, still silent, and observe him. He seems different today, calmer, less threatening. But the sparkle in his eyes is there, as always.
I know what you're thinking.
He says, handing you one of the croissants.
That I lured you here, that I manipulated you. But you know what? That was all you, Harleen.
You freeze, the croissant in your hand.
You have chosen to be here. You decided not to run away. And do you know why?
He leans forward, his voice becoming soft, almost tender.
Because you are just like me. You are done with all the rules, with all the lies. You want the chaos. You want the truth.
You feel something breaking inside you, or rather, something being released that you have kept locked away for so long. There is no voice in your head anymore that contradicts. No logic, no morality, no sense of duty. Just this one feeling, freedom.
Maybe you're right.
You finally say, your voice surprisingly firm. He leans back, his eyes sparkling with triumph.
Of course I'm right. So how does it feel?
What?
How it feels to finally wake up.
You pause, look out the window, where the city hums away in the distance. The city you have tried so long to save. The city that never really saw you. A smile spreads across your face, not the polite, professional smile you have worn your whole life, but a genuine, unrestrained smile.
It feels
You say, looking him in the eyes.
like life.